Hello! Finally Novas have arrived after so long. We thought they were never going to arrive. Thankfully they have. They're here. And they're very nice. That was the right way around, wasn't it? Yeah. I'm going to take one apart and talk Nova stuff while I do it. I never dreamt that Nova Rossi closing would end up being a good thing. At the time, it seemed like a complete disaster. It was, indeed. They've been one of the biggest forever and ever in the RC world. And I used to sell them in a model shop years and years ago when they were imported by Ted Longshaw. And they were always the best then. And over the years, we ended up becoming the Nova Rossi distributor, which was an incredibly proud moment. They closed due to COVID, financial issues. Nobody ever really worked out why and when they closed, because they closed for 3 weeks and then just never reopened, ever, never. And nothing was really confirmed about what was going to happen. We saw parts of the factory being sold off, CNC machines going to different people, and it just seemed to be dead. And then one day, this logo popped up on Facebook, and it got us all very excited. Some emails were sent, and things were happening, and things were getting interesting. The logo looked good. That's a badly printed one, but that was already exciting, and I've now got a t-shirt with it on. They've come a long way since they started Nova engines a while ago now, but very quietly in the background, getting things going. Let's talk about the engine rather than just talking about it. This is the B5R, the 5-port one. There's a 3 and a 5, and there's a steel and ceramic DLC versions of both. This is the DLC version with the DLC crank, DLC gudgeon pin, and a ceramic rear bearing. And then the steel version, I'll just grab one of those, is basically the same engine but without DLC crank, ceramic bearing, and with a silver and black head, and 40 to 50 pound cheaper. Nova cranks have always been pretty hard anyway, even without a DLC coating. So yeah, you've got options for both. I don't know which way around that should. That's the right way around, is it? That's the right way around. Don't know. Let's take the B5R apart. The build is effectively the same. They come in a box without the carb fitted. So that's in a nicely sealed bag, but we'll fit that shortly. The first interesting thing you notice is on here is a thermal insulator on the crankcase, not on the carburetor itself. Let's open this one up. Normally, most manufacturers put the thermal insulator here on the carb. Nova have chosen to put it here because it ends up with slightly more material on it than on that, insulates it better. And they've also created ridges along the inside of it, which you can't really see. But speaking to Andrea there, that helps the sealing of it as well. Rarely do they leak, but in the cycling world, there's an obsession with small changes put together make a big difference, and Nova seem to have embraced this concept with lots of small changes, nothing radical, but put together should make a difference. Let's get it taken apart. We'll take the back plate off. That's nicely produced. It's just a back plate really. OS released a back plate recently that was quite interesting as far as back plates go, but they all do effectively the same job. I watched them manufacturing these. They're produced on a CNC machine and then lovingly hand fettled by a guy spending what looked like me too much time fettling a back plate. It was obsessive. Everything they do seems to be quite obsessive, which is quite encouraging. That comes off as you'd expect. Rubber ring, and then Where's my 2.5mm? There we go. I have loosened this already, just to make sure I wasn't going to look like an idiot trying to crack screws off if you think it looks easy to loosen. That's the case. It comes with a Novorossi number 6 plug, which I presume is effectively the same as the old C6G, was it? CT06 it became in the end. I watched them producing them, and it was quite amazing to watch a glow plug produced. I always thought they were expensive, but having watched them produced, I now understand. The platinum's expensive inherently these days, but they're not all machine made. There's final hand assembly involved with it, and I feel like now £10–11 for a glow plug looks quite reasonable. Another nice touch is a photo etched logo onto the head button. It's completely unnecessary, but it looks lovely, and you'll only ever see it when you take your head off. But yeah, it looks nice. It's got the part number etched on it, so if you ever know you need one, you know what the part number is. And this is a 25% head button. All the UK engines are 25%. The only difference being the head button. There's a 16% head button and a 25% head button. 16 for Europe, running 16% nitro, 25 for UK, Asia and the USA. Some companies do one head button that apparently works for both, but I don't understand, because the volume is different between the 16 and 25% ones. To use one head button sometimes strikes me it's a mixture of the two, and it's not the ideal for either. Nova, I think, were one of the first way back to do two different head buttons, and at one point it was a pain with old Novorossi because they used to put the wrong head buttons in and it was confusing. They never seemed to get it right, but the first batch of these is correctly labelled 25% head button. It's got a 25% head button in it. They've done the right thing. Old Novorossi had the intention of having different head buttons, but they seemed to just fit random head buttons at times, and it made it confusing. But yeah, that's a nice tight fit on there, which is really quite encouraging, because I always like it tight on the liner. It's a good seal on it. Let me just get a flathead screwdriver and pull it off. Oh, I think Carl's gone for one. He might say hello in a minute. Is he saying hello? He's not saying hello. Right, take that off. That's coming out with the liner. There we go. Let's get that off. There we go. This is a really nice touch on the top of the liner. It's all chrome coated on the inside normally, but they've also chromed the top of it so that you get the best seal possible between the head shims and the top of the liner. Nobody's done it before, I don't know why. The only ones I remember, I think, that were done like this were some of the old Sirios with an aluminium liner rather than a brass liner. They were inherently a different thing anyway. But yeah, it's nice to see this done. When I first saw one, I thought there was a washer on the top of it, but no, it's done for that reason. And this is the 5-port piston and liner. It's effectively one exhaust port with two, oh, helps if I actually show it on there. One exhaust port with two exit ports as well on there, so it's a 1+2 exhaust port rather than one big exhaust port. On an on-road engine, you normally find one massive exhaust port sometimes with a higher timing on it. But yeah, that's that. And then we've got 5 ports around here. So you've got one big inlet port. That is, it's confusing when they call it a 5-port. It's effectively a 5+2. You see, you've got a big one inlet port there, 2 there, 2 there, and then 2 additional inlet ports. So it's a 5+2 port. It's not a 7-port, it's 5+2. doesn't add up to 7 in the counting ports world. It doesn't make sense. Sometimes you get a 7 port with 7 ports, not a 5+2. Again, it is what it is. It's a different way of counting it. Some people count a 5 port as 5 ports. Some call that 5+2. Hey ho. And then let's get the piston and liner out. Well, the piston out. That's a fairly standard thing, nicely machined, as you'd expect. And the conrod is effectively the Novorossi R4 17 rod. The 17 was the one that wasn't quite as good. It was superseded by the 18, which ended up being the best Novorossi rod ever. This is the next iteration of that. They weren't unbreakable, but they lasted longer than any rod I've ever known of, and this is the same again. Again, I watched these being made, and they start off as a much bigger piece of aluminium that's turned down, machined, drilled, and then the bushings put in. And I actually saw the individual bushings. They were really interesting to see on their own. Normally you just see them inserted in a conrod, but individually they were lovely. And then the crank, let's tap that out. There we go. That was lovely and tight. That's really encouraging because that's a proper bearing fit between the crank and the bearing, so you're not going to get any additional spin on the crank without the bearing spinning or anything going wrong like that. They've gone for a 14.5mm crank diameter across there with the silicon insert. It's fairly standard. It's got a big port inlet on there. That just strikes me it's going to be fast. I've not run one yet, but yeah, that's quite interesting. And that's the DLC coated one. The other interesting thing that you can't see really, they've got a DLC coated gudgeon pin on here. No, you can't see it. Which gudgeon pins don't wear massively in off-road engines, but in on-road they get a lot more stress. They're revving a lot higher, screaming a lot higher. But it's such a small part, it can be DLC coated and it reduce wear, increase efficiency. There's no downside to it. And the cost for DLC coating a part like that isn't going to be massive because you can fit lots of them into a DLC coating thing somehow. And it makes a minor difference. Again, lots of minor differences make a big difference. So yeah, it's looking very, very good. Having been to the factory and met them all, they are just obsessed with making the best thing they can make. Everything that they've done is looking very good. The whole packaging, they've been quite sensible and not included a manual, because realistically nobody reads a manual these days. Most of you have been running engines for years and years. They've included QR code to download so they can make changes to a manual anyway over time as things change. And the world's all about saving penguins and paper and everything else these days. Most of you will have several copies of the same manual if you've run several engines, so there's no point including it. But it's all available online when they get the website up and running. Stickers, always cool, and we've got piles of stickers as well. If you want more stickers, we can include them for you. They're amazingly well priced, to be fair. They start at 202, I think, for the 3-port one, which the basic Novorossi P5 was about £160, I think, at the end of the era, for their effectively more basic steel cranked, steel bearinged engine. For 200 quid now, that seems fantastic value considering the cost of everything has gone up massively. Other interesting things, all the packaging for the spare parts in these really cool packs makes no difference to what they do, but they look absolutely lovely. And they've gone with the offset bearing, which used to be an issue on the older ones, because the Novorossi offset bearing, what it does, the back of the bearing protrudes slightly, so the crank, can't really demonstrate it, the crank doesn't have a flange on it. So It effectively means the crank will never hit the outer race of the bearing. You either need a crank flange or a wider inner race to keep the bearing separated from the outer race of the bearing. The Novorossi bearing was massively expensive, and it was always an issue if they failed. It felt bad that there wasn't an aftermarket bearing available, but they justified it because it made a difference. Again, it was a minor difference, but put together it made a big difference, but the bearing was expensive. But they've now included it, and they've made the bearings a sensible price, so it's not an issue anymore. It's less than, I think, I've not looked in detail, but the price wasn't like surprisingly expensive. I think it's less than a OS ceramic bearing, maybe in line with Reds, maybe cheaper, but it's not expensive. They used to be an absolute fortune, so that's really nice. We've got them running in on the running in machine at the moment. Piston and liner fit has been absolutely lovely on them. They've been nice and tight, so they're getting a bit of a longer running on there, which has always been encouraging on the best engines, that you're going to get decent lifespan from them because they start in life relatively tight. But they've all been absolutely consistent so far. I'm just so pleased to see Nova back in the world. Like I say, it's turned into a good news story at the end of it. And they are just so obsessed with making the most perfect thing they can make. It's no wonder it's taken them so long. At one point, I was asking when they were going to come, I gave up because it didn't make any difference. They were going to come at some point. And we've actually been third in the world in this country to get them, behind USA, and I think the distributor for most of Asia is classed as one place, China, Hong Kong and various others. So yeah, the UK is third in the world. We've had good stock of it. Sales have been very good and gone out to several shops already. Lots of people have been waiting for them. And it's Christmas week when they've launched, so I think that's justified a few purchases for people. But yeah, there'll be various people running them all over the place in the next year or so. We've got GT and on-road engines coming in January. We've got all the off-road ones in stock at the moment. Pipes, manifolds, all the spare parts and bits and pieces like that. The pipe is a new one, 2182. Again, it's in a lovely packet. Doesn't make any difference really. It's effectively the 2135 pipe that Novorossi did, but a revised version of it. I need a pair of scissors. Which it's got a change to it insofar as the pressure return line has been moved to the front of the pipe. This changes the pipe length, and Stefano Colombini was telling me in detail how it works and how the baffle is moved and how it affects back pressure. His English wasn't great. He was speaking Italian and English at the same time, talking about baffles and doing flappy hands, and I lost track and I didn't really quite understand it, but he obviously knew what he was talking about with it. So I've got absolute faith in that working. The 2135 used to be very good on Novorossi engines and other engines. So this is an evolution of that. Again, the quest for perfection is there. There's two different manifolds, 50mm and 55mm. They're both standard width. It's just the length of the manifolds, a shorter one and a medium, or medium and longer, whatever you class 50 and 55 as, which will change. Bottom end power, top end power, depending which one you go for. Some people chop and change between manifolds on track conditions. Some people just put a manifold on and it connects to the exhaust, and that's the end of the story for them. But they do make a difference. You don't need to buy two manifolds at once. Buy one, try it. If you want a different driving style, you've got an option to go to the other one, but one manifold will do the job for you to begin with. So thank you for your support, everybody, and finally they are here. Enjoy your Novas. Thank you.